The first principle, which is context of contextual inquiry, what does it say? It says, go to the user's workplace and see the work as it unfolds. Now, when you see something which is being unfolded right in front of you, what you get is a detailed level of data, detailed level of information. So, we are more interested to capture the ongoing experience than the summary of these experiences. Concrete versus abstract data. We are more interested to get concrete data. Normally, abstraction is a valuable skill, but does the user have the right abstractions? We are not interested to get these abstractions. We are there to gather detailed and concrete data. The second principle of contextual inquiry, partnership. Make you and the user collaborators in understanding her work. What does it mean? See, as a designer, you must keep in mind the way you behave with your users has a great implication on the kind of data that you would get, right? So, while going for a contextual inquiry, the foremost step that you should do is you should behave as if you are a collaborator in that context with the user. So, second principle of contextual inquiry, coming on to the second principle. Now, the second principle states about partnership. You can see here in this slide. So, what do we mean by partnership? Partnership means working as collaborators, working in tandem with a group. So, here you should make you and the user collaborators in understanding her work. So, what does it mean? You need to make yourself as well as the user whom you are observing as collaborators while the user is completing the task. Keep this in mind, my friends, that there are various ways inquiries can be made. And the least possible way you would like to make an inquiry is to behave as a boss. Because the moment you want to behave as a boss, your body language, your tone, your gestures would communicate in a way which would inhibit the user to provide details about the working culture or the experience that the user has with the product. So, therefore, in a way to make sure that we get detailed information, we get not abstract, not general, but more insightful information, you have to behave as you are a collaborator. We will discuss this more in detail. So, use your relationship model to tilt the roles to the one that gets them to give you information. So, this is the pinnacle of doing contextual inquiry. You have to get some information, and these informations are very crucial in providing you with the direction for innovation. So, therefore, the onus is on you to get those informations. How do you get them? One way is to behave as collaborators, to make friendly gestures, to behave as a friend rather than intimidating the user or going around as a boss around the user while he or she performs the activities. Control the interview process. Don't control what data is given. Now, the second most important point here is to understand that you are the owner of this session. Session means this contextual inquiry session. You have to own that session. You have to keep a tab of the kind of activities, of the kind of dialogues, of the kind of discussions that you would be having with the user. Never ever allow the user to take control of the session. That would probably derail the entire session. But having said this, you also need to keep in mind that you should not influence the quality or the type of data that is being provided by the user. So, the point is you control the session, you steer the session in a way that your objective and goal is fulfilled, keeping in mind that you don't influence the type of data or information that is being provided by the user. Play a bit with the relationship model. You need data, good apprentice, and also insights into the practices, more observer, partner, educator. So here is more details about how generally ethnographers or designers conduct contextual inquiry. The role of apprentice, if you understand how an apprentice behaves, the idea is you are there to know more from him, as if you are a student, as if you have hardly any idea of how the task is to be completed. So, the master is your user. Now, this is the actual role that we feel or ethnographers worldwide has suggested works the best. When you behave as an apprentice, as a student, and the user behaves as a master. In this situation, there is a greater likelihood that good quality of data and information would be passed down to you, right? So, moving on from second principle to a third principle. Now, what does third principle of contextual inquiry highlights? It highlights interpretation of data. Okay? So, what do you mean by interpretation? Interpretation means coming up with detailed insights about the data that are being generated, giving meaning to observations. See, friends, when you are doing a contextual inquiry, a lot of information would be passed down to you, be it in terms of behavioral informations, as well as it would also be in terms of attitudinal informations. Now, these are informations until and unless you convert them into a meaningful way to draw insights. What does it mean for your design brief, or whatever data is being given to you by the user, how does it influence the problem statement that you would be conceiving, or in a way, how does it help in supporting you during your conceptualization process. Now, these statements are very important. Many a time we designers tend to overlook these statements, these understandings of how contextual inquiry is done, how it is being carried out during the process of activities that are being observed, and how do we come up with meaningful insights, change data into information. Now, when we talk about how do you identify problem statements, how do you define a need, we would talk about how do you convert the data that you have received into meaningful insights and informations. Examine it from many different frames. Now, I do often give an example in my class that if somebody makes a statement like this, that the sun rises from the east, right? Now, this is a universal truth and a sentence that no one can nullify. Now, like this statement, it is also true, or it can also be said that the sun doesn't rise from west, south, or north. Now, what does it happen? One way is thinking from the east, that the sun is rising from the east. The other way is thinking from the perspective that it doesn't rise from any of the other three directions. Now, this is what perspective means. Eventually, when you are getting data and when you are reporting the data, you would be also be working on converting those data into meaningful insights. And one of the best way of doing that is to change your perspective. When a statement is made, think about how differently it can be interpreted. like the examples that I have given. Look for structure, look for work patterns. As a designers, we are always interested to understand if something is getting repeated over a period of time. Can we see something that is being deliberately or not deliberately getting repeated over multiple users? Say for example, I am observing the buying intention of a product, say a brand of salt, and I have observed that out of 50 users that I have observed, 30 of them go to the shop and directly name the brand without even giving a thought about the other brands that are available in the shop. Now, this is a striking behavior. This is a striking pattern. Why? Out of 50, 30 of them are displaying this kind of behaviors. So, therefore, this type of behavior is very important to be captured and to be interpreted for coming up with the problem statement or design brief and to direct the conceptualization process. From facts, make hypotheses about implications, test them out and look at implications for design. So, design is an activity, has been explored enormous time over generations. Many designers prefer to come up with concepts and test them out with their end users. This is a very, very crucial activity to perform, because without going to the end product, what the designer is doing is, without investing that much time to do conceptualization and detailed drawings, coming up with engineering specifications and then prototyping, at the initial phase itself, the designer is getting inputs from the users in a way that tells the designer whether the user would prefer this kind of concepts or not. Now, this saves a lot of time for the designers as well as ensures that the end product that is being generalized, that is being detailed out or conceptualized, has minimum amount of flaws. This is also called iterative design process. So, you have to constantly think about questions in your mind. Why this is like this? Why he is doing this, using this product in this particular way? Why is he not, or the user not, using the product in different ways? Why is he pressing here? Why he is opening the product from this side? What does he think about while he is using the product? Now, all these statements would allow you to generate meaningful insights, and then these can also be stated as hypotheses, or you can think about statements, okay, if I do this, then what will happen? Now, these kind of inquisitive inquiries has always been explored in design by designers, but here our contextual principle, the third principle of contextual inquiry, which is interpretation, provides us with a caution, and the caution is, don't bias them. You have to listen carefully. See, every word that you make, every gesture that you make will always influence them. So, therefore, you have to take utmost care in a way. Remember what we have discussed about the apprentice, the student and teacher role in a way. So, that is the role that we are referring to. So, you have to refer to that role in a way that they don't influence your appearance, your presence there does not influence the kind of data, the kind of information users want to give you. Now, moving on to the final and fourth principle of contextual inquiry. The final principle, or the fourth principle of contextual inquiry, states about focus. Keep the conversation on useful topics without wresting control entirely away from your customer, user or expert. Now, what does it mean? It means that as a designer, you have the role to steer the entire process of inquiry. You have to make sure that the kind of questions and the answers that your user provides, it doesn't go in a direction which is deviating from the goal or the objective of your contextual inquiry. This is very important, friends. Otherwise, generally, because contextual inquiry is a very highly resourceful activity, you would lose a lot of time and resources in collecting data that are not meaningful. Remain objective and on track. Okay? Like steering a conversation. I mean, you can think about when you and your friends have a conversation and you want to discuss about a certain topic. So, like the conversation you have with your friends, every time when the conversation tends to deviate from the objective, you try and catch hold of that discussion and pull it back to its central objective. That's how you have to behave. The idea is why we are doing all these things. The idea is we should get more detailed information, accurate information, information that is reliable in nature. And the last and another crucial point is capitalize on surprises. You might encounter something which is very unique and you have never seen, you can never imagine also a product being used in such a different way by your user. So don't try to mask your ignorance. The idea is show that, oh, it's a surprise for me. You were ignorant, and there's such a nice way of, looking at the kind of products or the activities that the user is performing. But remember, don't pass on any attitudinal words like, as I said, wrongly, like nice, good, prefer, better, like this, right? So this is all about the introduction of contextual inquiry. Now, the most basic question. So we are going in the reverse way, first learning about the principles and then we would justify and see what it is all about. So my friends, at least from the principles, you have understood what a contextual inquiry is all about. It is a process to gather user data with the objectives like getting structured data about the practice. By practice means the tasks, the processes, the services, the way the user uses a product, the sequential steps in which an activity is performed. We need to get those structured data. We need to also make unarticulated knowledge explicit. Now, here you have to refer to the principle of contextual inquiry where we discussed about interpretation. Remember what we discussed. We discussed that these data that you would be getting are highly unexplicit in nature or unarticulated in nature. They are random in nature. You have to put an order to this data in order to bring a insight on how do you use this data for coming up with the design brief. Capture details of habitual invisible work. Friends, even if your user is breaking the task while you are observing the user, even if he is breaking the task and he is going out for a glass of water or a cup of tea, ensure that it is reported in your data logs. These all are very crucial and important pieces of information that would require during your conceptualization. And keep it in mind that every time we do a contextual inquiry, our intention is to get and record the habitual work, the work that is being reflected as habits by our end users. So, ideally, when you conduct a contextual inquiry, each of these interview sessions and observing the task lasts for around 2 to 3 hours. It can be more also. This is just a rough idea of how the entire contextual inquiry session would go about. Around 10 to 20 sessions you can do over a period of time. Now, it is because one interview session or one contextual inquiry session would provide you data in such a massive format that it is very hard to conduct contextual inquiry for more than 20 or 30 users. So therefore, at least you should try that the ideal number of getting data from different users is around 20 to 30, around 10, 20 or 15 to 20 anywhere, but not less than 10. The idea is it should not be less than 10. So that much amount of users you need to cover for conducting contextual inquiry. Keep in mind, my friends, that when I say 10 users, it might seem very easy for you, but if you really start conducting a contextual inquiry session for one person, you would realize the extent to which amount of resources are invested, specifically time, and then the amount of data that you get, which you need to interpret for the results to be utilized later in your design process. Now, the first point, so before I present you some of the case studies that my students have carried out as part of their coursework in contextual inquiry, I would like to summarize some of the few important points for contextual inquiry. The first important point is, remember that you are the interviewer. Think about an appropriate relationship model. Think about the discussions that we had while we were discussing about the roles of how a designer and a user would be while conducting a contextual inquiry. Now, is the role can be explained in terms of a scientist and a subject, or an interviewer or interviewee, or an expert or novice, or a guest and a host, or a master and apprentice? Can you remember what we discussed earlier? Among all these roles, which one would you like to select? Yes, you are correct. The role that you would like to select or you would be selecting is the role of a master and apprentice. Now, who is the master? Your user is the master, and you would behave as an apprentice. The user is the faculty, is the teacher, and you would be behaving as a student. They demonstrate, you investigate. They explain, you record. There will be times you need to deviate a bit, but then always keep in mind that the focus and control of the session should be at your end. As a designer, when I used to conduct contextual inquiry for some projects in the past, there would be some situations when it would be out of your control, like there is some major fault in the electricity, there is a major fault in the environment, there is a major breakdown in some of the situations, there is a major emergency situation. These things might happen, so don't panic. You have to again restart the session at a suitable and comfortable day in consultation with your user and carry it out, right? So this was in short about contextual inquiry. Now what we will do is we would see some case studies, and to see those case studies, my friends, we need to understand how this modeling of the data that is being generated out of contextual inquiry sessions are carried out. Now, why modeling is required? Friends, you would be conducting a session of contextual inquiry for about 2 to 3 hours. You might use your mobile phone with permission from your user to record the session entirely, or a camera also. Now, all this data has to be transformed into some way through which later on, say probably when you start your conceptualization process, or even when you start creating your design brief and problem statement, you can extract meaningful insights. Now, how to do that? There are few models through which we do that. I teach my students in the class to use those models extensively so that they can capture the data and convert them into a insightful model through which these meaningful observations and insights can be drawn. So, as I said, contextual inquiry produces huge amounts of detailed knowledge about the customer. The data that is generated is huge, it's enormous. You cannot make an average of all the qualitative data and draw insights. Now, since the data is qualitative in nature, it is not possible to make an average of all the data and then just present it through some tables. No, it is not possible, right? So the way out is work models. They provide a coherent way of structuring all this detailed data, revealing the underlying structures that are common across all the users. So what is involved in these work models? So there are 5 models generally we prepare for contextual inquiry. The first one is called a flow model. The second one is called a sequence model. The third one is called an artifact model. The fourth one is called a culture model. And the fifth and last one is called the physical model. Now these 5 models are created for a particular session. So example, say you have conducted a contextual inquiry session with an user in his own place for about 2 to 3 hours. Once you complete that, you come back to your space or your office or your room and you create these 5 models out of the data that you have collected. Or if you are in a group, generally contextual inquiry many a time is conducted as a group activities, because it is very difficult for a single person to manage the entire session and prepare these models. So while one person is busy in interviewing the user and observing the daily activities or the task that he is performing, the other person can quickly generate these models. So these are the 5 models that are being generated. We will discuss them one by one. So the first one, the flow model, it highlights the overall organization and the coordination of that session, of that activity that you are observing. The sequence model represents the detailed model of actions. The artifact model represents the detailed model of artifact use. The culture model represents the schematic influences or the influences that the user have while he is doing an work or an activity. And the physical model represents the physical structure, okay, the physical structure of the space inside which the contextual inquiry has been performed. So let's start with the flow models of work. Now, as discussed earlier in my last discussion, the purpose of flow models is to capture and visualize the roles of individuals. Remember friends, when you are doing a contextual inquiry, there will be one individual, there may be one individual, or there may be more than one individual. You have to identify the roles of each one of them. The second important thing here is you have to define the communication and the coordination between them. Third, the mechanisms that support and hinder, and the strategies that are being displayed, that are being taken by these individuals or entities who are working in a session tandemly to complete a task. Now, the flow models of work generally indicates key components of the overall flow. Now, these are some of the syntaxes that are being used to model the flow diagram. We would, once we see the case study, it would be more clear. Individuals are shown as bubbles with responsibilities. Groups of individuals are highlighted with common actions. Places central to work, larger box with responsibilities are being used as highlighters. Then their responsibilities are highlighted. The flow of information or interaction is being highlighted with arrows between individuals, or it can be also between products. Artifacts, small boxed label on a flow. Communication topic or action, the communication channels that are being displayed between the individuals and the actions between them, these are labeled on a flow. Now, the most important here and the critical part here is to highlight a breakdown in communication or any interaction. Friends, keep in mind that this part is the most crucial part of contextual inquiry. Identifying breakdowns in communications, it is done using a thunderbolt icon. Now, why I would say so? Many times while conducting contextual inquiry, you would observe that the task which was supposed to be performed by your user could not be completed, and the reasons can be many. But the idea is, as an investigator or an interviewer, you should not influence your users to complete the task. Rather, you should investigate the reasons based on which the task could not be completed. Many times you would also observe that because of limited idea about product use, the user is trying hard to use a product. There may be also situations that because of some activities which cannot be thought of, or say probably as an example I can say, suddenly a phone call comes or an emergency situation happens, the user has to stop that activity. Now, all these can be classified as breakdowns, and these breakdowns are very crucial in contextual inquiry to be highlighted. As a designer, our objective is to identify these breakdowns and to see whether we can devise a strategy to make sure that these breakdowns are taken care of by our design solutions. So, these breakdowns in this flow model are highlighted by the lightning bolt icons. Let us now see one of the projects or case studies of contextual inquiry. As we progress forward, we will discuss this in more detail. This is one of the case studies that my student have done in their classes. His objective was to study and understand the activities of the post office here in our city. So, he has done a contextual inquiry on the numerous activities that he has observed, and he has detailed out all the work models that we have discussed earlier. Let us start with the flow model. Now, this flow model is very interesting. If you can see, these are all the people involved while he was observing the activity. The assistant postmaster, the head postmaster, the packerman, the postman, right, the postal assistant, the sorting assistant, the customer, right. Can you see the way he has highlighted the individuals who were involved there? And he has also highlighted the objects that are being used: treasury, the stamp and philately bureau, right. Check out the objects: money, the stamps, the receipts, the money, letters and the parcel, the forms, again the receipts, right, letters and parcels, letter and parcels, right, money, letters and parcel, the receipts. So, he has highlighted the individuals who are interacting, the products that have been communicating between these individuals as a form of service, and now you can also see the communication between them. If you see, the assistant postmaster interacts with the head postmaster regarding some reports and questions, and the head postmaster reverts back with some assignments and suggestions. The head postmaster interacts with the treasury for revenue, and the treasury returns back with funds to the head postmaster. If you see the interactions, for example, the postal assistant sends letters and parcels to the sorting assistant, and in return the sorting assistant has questions which he directs to the postal assistants. This is the way through which a flow model is highlighted. So friends, what you have seen here is the important part are the individuals, these entities, the objects which are being used, the communications. If you see, these are the communications, these are the dominant elements that are represented in a flow model. The other important thing to observe here, which are these breakdowns which the interviewer has observed. Now, where are the breakdowns? The breakdowns are between the sorting assistants and the packer man, while they are communicating with the use of objects like letters and parcels. He has observed, so the interviewer has observed these breakdowns. Another breakdown which he has observed was between the customer and the postal assistant. Now, when did this breakdown happen? The breakdown happened while questions were asked regarding bookings. The other breakdown that was observed was between customer and the postman, and it was during their communication with objects like letters and parcels, right? So, these are the crucial important pieces of information that are reported in a flow model. As friends, I have said in my last discussion, the last slide that we have discussed, breakdowns are the most crucial important pieces of information. Wherever there is an issue of the task not getting completed, issues being raised but not sorted out, there is a pause and then the activity is not getting complete, it can be termed as a breakdown and can be highlighted contextual inquiry flow model, right? Now, let us move on to the next model, and the next model is the sequence models of work. Now, what is a sequence model of work? A sequence model of work examines the actions of workers and how and when they occur. So, ideally what it does, the way in which an activity is performed, or you can say the flow of these activities, workflow, first this, second that, third this. So, the ways in which comes first, which comes second, which comes third, these flow is termed as the sequence models of work. By examining their structure, a designer or an interviewer can identify their strategy, their intent, the important dynamics of the task, and the related procedures. Friend, here in the second work model, it is important to keep in mind that any activity that is performed can be modeled into a sequence flow. Now, when we model or when we see an activity to perform, there would be two crucial pieces of information that are generally or can be observed. First is there would be an intent. Now, what do you mean by intent? For example, what is the intent of this course? The intent of this course is to teach you the basics of product design and innovation. Likewise, while you go and observe an activity with your users, in their context, the users have an intent of the activity that they are performing. So an intent simply means the goals. Why? What is the goal based on, because of which the user is performing that activity? You have to identify that goal first, and that would be called as an intent. The second most important thing is, while a goal can be a bigger objective, it can be broken down into smaller activities. Like in this course, 3 faculties are coming together to teach you one course, and each one of us have smaller objectives, right? Likewise, while a user can have a bigger objective for completing a task, to complete the entire task, it can be broken down or into smaller activities with intents of those smaller activities and trigger. Now, what is a trigger? Trigger is the first step or the first activity that the user does to start the sequence model or the sequence flow, to start the activity. These two things are very important and crucial pieces of information, friends, you would like to record. So, the first thing is that you need to report and identify the intent. The second part is the goal. So, the first part is the intent and the second part is the trigger. These two are the most crucial pieces of information you have to record while you design the sequence model. Let us see how a sequence model is being created. Now, if you can see here, this is the sequence model of an activity that I have shown the flow model in my last slide of the post office. Here, this is a sequence model of a customer bringing these parcels and letters and till the dispatch happens. Now, if you see, the intent is highlighted here. So, what is the intent? So, the intent is to complete the process of sending a post. So, the customer has visited this post office in order to make sure that he can deliver or send a parcel or a post. That is the overall intent of the user, right? Now, here this part where the customer enters the post office becomes the what? Trigger, right? So, the intent is he has visited the post office to send some parcel and or post or sending a post, and the first stage of this activity starts with the user entering the post office. So, how the sequence model starts here? Let us see. The customer, the first activity, the customer brings letter parcel to post first, which is the trigger. Customer buys envelopes and stamps. Customer writes addresses and attaches stamps. Customer stands in queue at the counter. Customer hands over letter or the parcel. The postal assistant then weighs this letter parcel and enter the details. Customer pays through cash or the card. The sorting assistant sorts the letters and the parcels. The letters and parcels are then handed over to regular or the speech dispatch sections. The letter or parcel packed by the packer man and then they are dispatched. Now, after looking at this sequence model, there might be some questions which might get raised, like why are these statements, why are there statements like this or this, why, if it is an activity that we are observing, why it is a statement that tells specifically what the customer has done. Now, Keep in mind, this is an aggregated sequence model that I am presenting in front of you of around 5 to 6 contextual inquiry being carried out, and the same approach have been observed. So, to make sure that we collect and present all the information at a particular sequence model, this model have been generated. While you continue, for example, while you are doing a contextual inquiry, while you will be making a sequence model, you might use those languages. This is the reason why, if you can highlight here in this section where it says that the customer pays through cash or card, there is two options, cash or card, because it is an aggregated model. There are few customers which have been observed to be paying through cash, and few customers who have been observed to be paying by card. While you are doing for a single person in your contextual inquiry, you would write that the customer pays through cash, right? You don't need to come up with an aggregate model. So, this is a sequence model. So, friends, what do you understand from these two work models? The first work models identifies the individuals between which communications happens. It defines the communications, it defines the entities and the objects that are being used, and also highlights the breakdowns that happens. The second model takes up each of those communications as an activity and enlists the flow in which those activities are performed. Here also, if you observe a breakdown, you can highlight using a lightning bolt icon. Moving on to the third model, which is the artifact model. The artifact model highlights the products or the objects that are being used by the individual entities that you have observed in the contextual inquiry. Now, if you can see here in the slide, the objects that are being used by the postmen's or the post office individuals and the customers and other individuals who were being observed are the weighing scale, the sorting assistant table, the software that was being used by the postal assistant, the postmaster's table, the postman's bag, and the bicycle. Now, friends, keep in mind that you have to detail out the objects that are being used by these individual elements. If you can see here in the postal weighing scale, the way in which it is designed, the units that are present, the buttons that are present, even the screen that are being present have been highlighted. These are all very crucial information for a designer to be recorded. Similarly, the assistance table, sorting table, the way it is arranged, the screenshot of the software is also highlighted, the postmaster's table, the postman's bag, as well as the bicycle. So, friends, it is not only important to keep or name the objects or the artifacts that are being used, it is very much important to make sure that these objects are detailed out in your artifact model. The next model we would move into is the cultural model. In the next model, which is the cultural model, this model is one of the crucial models among all the 5 work models that we have been discussing. Now, why is this so important? It is very important because it highlights the influences that are responsible for the individuals being observed to take a particular decision over the other. Now, what do I mean by this? Let me explain this to you. Think that you are observing a particular activity and there are 2 individuals who are discussing a particular situation and they are communicating between them. Suddenly, one message comes to one of the individual's mobile phone, and he opens the mobile and says that, and he checks that message. Now, the content of the message, if it is very important and something related to emergency, will always influence the extent to which this conversation between these two individual entities will happen. So, therefore, in this communication, the influencer is the message that came or that was delivered while the communication was taking place. This is what is being highlighted in a cultural model. So, cultural model highlights the influences that influences key decisions of those individual elements or the individuals that are working towards achieving a particular task. The same thing can be said for a product. For example, take the coffee baking machine. Now, while the user is using the machine to prepare a cup of coffee, suddenly if the electricity goes out, or if someone else arrives into the house and the user realizes, oh, instead of 1 cup of coffee, I need to make 2 cups of coffee, another more cup of coffee. So, all these informations will influence the way he will behave or he will act in that particular situation. These are called the influences. If you can see here in the cultural model that is being highlighted, the influences here are the sorting assistant, between the sorting assistant, the packerman and the assistant postmaster. The assistant postmaster shouts at the packerman to hurry up things and get the things dispatched. And also the statements of the sorting assistant and the packerman influences the assistant postmaster to keep on saying hurry up for a particular period of time. Similarly, there are influences between the head postmaster and the assistant postmaster who needs to report the reports on time. So, time is a influencer, right. There is influences between the postman and the customer and the postal assistant. Here same, the time is the influencer. So, this is how a cultural model is prepared, highlighting the individuals, these individuals and the influences that are affecting the way they do an activity. Moving on to the next is the physical model.